If you had seen me that icy midnight, you would have thought I was fleeing a crime. The old slippers slapping against the pavement, my heart pounding louder than my footsteps, the tremble in my hands not from age, but from a terror that clung to my spine. I was running for my life, not from a stranger, but from a man I once believed was my last chance at love. For months, I convinced myself that what pushed me out that door was love. Only now do I admit it was fear, and in the end, everything unraveled with the cold ping of one text message. Perhaps my mistake came long before that night. Perhaps it began the winter I pulled a faded scarf from the back of my drawer and squinted at an old black and white photo, heart beating with a nervous energy I hadn't felt in decades. I'd spent my entire life as a careful woman, devoted wife, watchful mother, always a step behind my husband's shadow. After he passed away 10 years ago, the house became a museum of small silences. Dinner for one, a teacup that never left its place, a clock I refused to face because the empty hours would stare right back. The children scattered to distant cities, living their noisy lives, while I practiced surviving quietly, one day at a time. When the invitation to the classmates' reunion arrived, I surprised myself. The thought of dusting off memories and meeting faces from my youth felt both terrifying and thrilling. My reflection, even with silver hair and softening skin, straightened with anticipation. I felt, just for a night, the freedom of choosing my own steps. That's when I saw young Sue, always the gentle one, the boy who once lent me his notebooks without fanfare. His shoulders had rounded, lines carved kindness into his face. Like me, he had lost his partner, and years of caring for a sick mother seemed to have shaped his way of moving. Deliberate, patient, with hands that understood how to comfort without a word. We talked, as only old friends can, with silence folded safely between us. I let him match my pace under falling ginkgo leaves, believing that such small gestures could be love itself at this stage in life. Everyone thinks love in old age is ridiculous, a farce, a last grasp at youth. I believed it too, until I found that love in the twilight years isn't about sweeping promises, but repeated gentle reassurances. Someone who remembers your favorite side dish, someone who listens as you speak, someone who makes you feel seen. The world could say my feelings were immature for my age, but it was my heart, not my birth year, that insisted on a different truth. Before long, young Sue and I built new routines. We'd walk in the park, I'd give him an old radio. He'd water my plants, change a flickering bulb, move quietly through the rooms of my small house, my solitary fortress, paid off just before my husband's passing. In his presence, my loneliest spaces felt less empty. It seemed innocent to imagine sharing the rest of my days, and before I truly understood the risk, I decided to give him a little more permanence, a change of names on a deed, the merging of 2 retirements, as if hope itself could be notarized. Some friends quietly disapproved. I dismissed their warnings as cynicism. I believed that what could be written on a page could be forged in real trust. I signed everything. I handed over the deed, and young Sue began to change, so suddenly it turned my world on its head. Overnight, he stopped asking me to stroll through the park. He spoke less. Strangers came and went, under the pretense of home repairs. My favorite books vanished, boxed up with labels I didn't recognize. The kitchen was reorganized, cupboards filled with his things. His shoes lined the front hall where mine once stood. When I tried to hold on to the life we'd started building, he'd look at me, cold, detached, as if I were a stubborn old woman he had to tolerate rather than someone he once cared for. Nights stretched long and sleepless, my mind racing with doubts I tried desperately to ignore. When his nephew came, holding folders and speaking of repairs and new costs and even suggesting loans, the house felt suddenly suffocating. I noticed my secret drawer had been fiddled with. Unfamiliar transactions appeared in my bank book. There was no outright proof, but all the small signs added up. I was no longer the owner. I was a guest, a ghost drifting from room to room, unwelcome in my own sanctuary. Every day, I promised myself I would leave. Every day, I found an excuse to stay. I thought of the shared evenings, the comfort of a familiar face, the idea that maybe he was just awkward, or that love in old age must be full of such clumsy misunderstandings. I told myself to be patient, taught my heart to brush off the loneliness as just a bump in the road. But as illness weighed on me, my hair falling more with each day, my resilience quietly unraveling, I began to fear I would lose not just the house, but myself. Then, on a gray afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message. No name, just a number I didn't recognize. A few flat sentences, accompanied by an image, a copy of the deed, and a photograph of an unfamiliar woman. Sent at as if in panic, the midnight timestamp spoke of urgency. My hands shook as I set down my mug, unable to look away from the evidence. I went to the district office, checked records online, pored over legal phrases and notations. The home, my home, had been transferred cleanly and quietly into Young-Soo's name. New mortgage lines spanned the bottom of the page. My consent had never been needed. My trust had been enough to undo a lifetime of careful saving. The pain pressed against my chest, raw and bright, as if years of calluses had vanished in an instant. Slowly, I gathered my essentials. Faded school crafts from my children, my husband's old notebook, insurance cards, bank books, spare keys, the new seal bearing my unfamiliar name. I wrapped them in a handkerchief and placed them in my bag. I waited for silence, then slipped through the door, each footstep across the dim golden streetlights, an act of desperate preservation. I was not a tragic heroine or a foolish widow. I was a living woman refusing to let her life be stripped away in the night. This was not escape. This was survival. In the strange, narrow room I rented near my childhood neighborhood, I took careful, trembling breaths. Days passed. I visited the legal aid center, gathered documents, listened to hard advice. It would take time and grit to untangle the mess we'd made. And yet, in this small space, without anyone watching, I found my back seemed to hurt less. I cooked what I pleased, walked at my own pace, and controlled, if only for a while, the rhythm of my life again. Even with little, I tasted freedom. Over time, I replayed every moment for clues. Why the changes? Why the icy distance? Why the secrecy? I kept returning to the mysterious message. Who sent it? Was it a warning, a threat, or a desperate plea? The old classmate who organized the reunion mentioned seeing Young-Soo recently, describing his face as haunted, tense, a man running from something unseen. I considered texting back the unknown number, but I hesitated. In that moment, silence felt as much a choice as any action I might take. A second message arrived, this one devastating in its simplicity. 2 photos this time. One was an old wedding picture, the other a recent copy of hospital records. Included was a name and relationship I had never imagined. That was the moment the twist reached me. Not a betrayal by one, but a web tangled by sorrow, desperation, and the terrible weight of unspoken obligations. It turned out Young-Soo had never dissolved his marriage. His wife resided in a care facility, her medical costs mounting, his life unraveling under the burden. The stranger who sent the messages was not a threat, but his wife herself, or, as later gathered, someone close to her, determined to bring the truth to light. The sudden changes, the strangers in my house, the urgency and coldness, it was all part self-preservation, part heartbreak. In my own longing for connection, I had stepped unknowingly into someone else's suffering. I spent days switching between anger and pity. How much had I lost out of trust? How much had he clung to me out of fear and need? It bruised my pride to realize I had given shelter to a man who used my house as his last straw. It wounded my heart to see that his wife was another woman like me, fighting private battles from a hospital bed, her life as solitary and vulnerable as mine. I contacted a lawyer, armed with the second message and all the documents I could gather. I was told the process would be long and uncertain. Gifting a house was hard to undo, but with clear evidence of deceit and hidden relationships, hope remained that justice could be found. The weeks blurred together in a haze of paperwork and whispers. Young-Soo sent threatening letters. The reunion chatter hummed with rumors. Some pitied me, others called me naive, while a few reminded us that romance at our age is a risk we carry with our hopes. Each morning, standing at the mailbox, I braced for more news. On quiet days, I let myself relax. On stressful days, I brewed strong tea and clutched the mug until my hands ached. With time, my heart settled. I learned how to buy side dishes at the market for myself, ignored the news when it threatened panic. I sat in the park with other elders, reading, sharing small smiles, naming our aches and habits with a frankness I once thought impossible. In my private moments, I no longer let Young-Soo's smile be the first memory I reached for. Instead, I remembered the trembling in my hands as I held that deed, the rush of self-protection that brought me out into the night, the taste of seaweed soup in my small, borrowed kitchen. Eventually, the courts sided with me, at least in part. The home was not lost completely. My rights were restored enough to let me close that chapter with dignity. The last message from that unknown number arrived. A brief thank you, a blessing for health, a fragile apology for the pain caused. Holding my phone, I sat in silence, aware that none of us are ever only victims or villains. We are, all of us, just people, vulnerable, flawed, sometimes acting out of hope, sometimes out of desperation. Today, I volunteer in a small library-like booth, sharing old books with other seniors. The days are slow, filled with small talk about weather, recipes, nighttime aches. Through this, I realize growing older isn't about learning to accept what can be taken from us. It is about learning what we must hold tight, our dignity, our self-respect, our ownership of our own story. More important than documents, PIN codes, or bank statements is knowing that in the end, we must hold the keys, literally and metaphorically, to our own hearts. Some say love knows no age. I agree, but I add this. With age comes new responsibilities, to protect, to question, and to keep ourselves whole. The warmth of companionship is real, but so is the necessity for caution. Now, when another's charm threatens to sweep me away, I remember the paperwork too. So, I ask you, if someone came offering love in your twilight years, what documents would you check first before opening your door in the night?